First of all, I wanted to congratulate you on finishing your first 10K race in Monahans, Texas at the Monahans Sandhills State Park. Tell me a little bit about what led you to compete in that particular race. I'm sure there's been other opportunities over the last year. What made you choose that one?
Well, yes, there was opportunities to do other races, and to be frank, where I live, there isn't exactly just an exuberant amount of races to pick from to begin with, to be honest, because it's pretty flat out here. There's not a lot of hills, there's not a lot of terrain. But I knew that I didn't just want to run a flat, straight course. I kind of do that in training on a track, and I wanted to find something that was going to be really just have good scenery. I wanted to enjoy not only running and competing in the race, but also be able to appreciate and enjoy the scenery when I turned around and look up and look at where I'm at. And I had been to Monahans before. I'd been to the Sandhills State Park before, and I just thought it was a pretty place to hang out. I mean, people do camp there, so it's a spot that people come and enjoy. And I knew it was going to have some hills. I knew it was going to have some terrain and elevation changes, so I figured that would probably be a good start. So why the 10K? Really, I kind of, when I was looking at it and deciding on what I wanted to do, I thought about signing up for the 5K, and that would have been probably wise for a first-time race. Everybody, in my mind, everybody does a 5K. Your grandma down the street does a 5K.
You hear 10K, you hear 5K, even more than that. What is that? What is that equivalent in non-metrics? Like, how many miles is a 10K? How many miles is a 5K?
Well, interestingly, that was something I had to learn along the way as I started discovering running. Was a lot of them use K because it's just easier to say, to be honest. But
Probably because it originated running
in Europe.
In Europe, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Correct. Really, it goes from the smallest race being a 1K, which is a little over a mile. You do have your 1 milers. Then the 5K would be 3.1 miles. And then from then on, frankly, it just doubles. Your, of course, marathon is 26.2.
Wow.
It does go on from there into the ultra running. Anything past a marathon will be considered ultra running or an ultra marathon.
It's almost like you're part of a club. I mean, you're a member. By completing this, you almost become part of a society, so to speak, right?
Well, and that's something interesting, that there's two avenues of thought when it comes to that question. And in one hand, which is the perspective that I choose to take, is that by finishing a competition race, you therefore are a competitive runner. In my eyes, if you've competed, you are a competitive runner. Doesn't matter what time you got, doesn't matter, how fast you were. The fact that you decided that you were going to compete and you competed and you finished and you completed it, you are a competitive runner. The other avenue of thought, which a lot of people that do this a lot take, is that, you're not really a competitive runner unless you make a career out of it, which I can see that point of view, but I don't agree. I think, it's the aspect of community, yeah, and community is such a huge and vital, important part of a lot of these competitions and running as a whole. One thing I did notice on the track, even as I was running, I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel like any of these people were looking at me and thinking, what a loser. He's not even running, and I thought that, obviously. My self-doubt is always, you're always going to be your own worst critic, but I had people pass by me and fist bump me and say, keep going, you're doing a great job. And then they book it and they just fly. I've had people, you're going one way, they're coming back the other way because there was a loop at the end, and they're saying, good job, keep going, you guys got this. The community of running, the more and more I get involved with it, is so vitally and it's just so positive. Everybody in it is just so positive. Everybody wants you to succeed. And even in not just related specifically to running, but the health and fitness world, there's a huge misconception, in my opinion, that everybody there is judging you and you're always judged. No. I mean, the people that you meet on the track, in the gym, whoever, they want to see, they are happy to see that you are trying and putting in effort. Everybody is.
And I think that's what separates this from a lot of other competitive sports, is that there is, in most other competitive sports or team sports even, there is a very distinctive win or lose. There is no participation trophy. There is no participation bump. There is no, other than your teammates, and even then it could possibly get negative. You don't see in this particular aspect, from what I'm gathering you talking about, there is a level of partnership / camaraderie that exists among the various runners that probably isn't seen in other competitive sports.
Well, I think the reason that it's that way is because, yes, and a lot of other competitive sports, football, basketball, baseball, list goes on and on. And I, there are some non-team sports that probably hold the same mindset. Yeah, if you work together with a team, it's always going to be a team effort. Every time, win or lose, you lose as a team, you win as a team. And that's a very important concept that I think everybody should learn and experience with other people. But when it comes to running, it's just you and the track, man. There is nobody else that is going to, and this is something that I felt on the running the race. I was about maybe 3/4 of the way done, and my ankles were just on fire. And at that point, you've got two options. You either quit, but you still have to walk back, or you just finish. Nobody else can finish your race for you. Nobody else can run for you. True, they can pick you up and carry you down there, but nobody's going to do that because everybody else is running their own race too. It's a very individual sport.
And that brings up an interesting point that you may or may not have thought about, but being a Christian, you may have thought about this. And that is, in the New Testament, Paul is talking to Christians about running the race. And through the years, I've heard different pastors bring in a viewpoint that it's not about one Christian versus another Christian in the race of life, in the race to the finish line, and the finish line being eternity and heaven, is that everybody's on their own race. Everybody finishes their own race. But as Christians, we also undergird each other as well. So there's a fairly interesting parallel in this particular viewpoint of your race here that you're talking about that does correlate quite a bit with the spiritual aspect.
Well, and I think the reason that Paul used that terminology, to run your race, is because until you've experienced an actual, real, genuine race and you've competed, it's going to be hard to understand. But once you do it, yeah, I mean, when I was done, I did think about that. I thought about that verse, and I thought, it gave me a whole new perspective and appreciation for it. Because, like I said, when you're out there on the track, it's just you. Nobody else, like I said, can finish it for you. They can't move your legs for you. They can't do anything. the only thing that anybody else can do for you is encourage you on. And it's up to you to finish. It's up to you to keep going. It's up to you to say, you know what, I may be in pain right now, but I got to finish. I got to complete that finish. And going back to the starting line, it's also your decision to even show up to begin with.
Man, there's a lot of spiritual.
There's a huge amount of spiritual aspects that play into that. Yeah, run your own race is an absolutely crucial statement, because you are always going to run your own race, because everybody else is in their own head on that track.
Well, and you can go further with that, and then from a Christian standpoint, you are running your race to receive the prize of the higher calling, which is salvation and heaven. Nobody can run that race for you spiritually. You have to make the commitment to do it yourself. And so, yeah, I do see a lot of parallels here, and I can see that. But I also want to go back a little ways here, to your first foray into running. Have you always enjoyed this? What led you to, and I use the term loosely because you have said that it's not as crucial, but competitive running. What led you to this? Have you always wanted that?
Well, when I was growing up, I actually hated running. I wasn't really in competitive sports. I didn't play football. I didn't play sports in general in school. I was an orca dork. I was playing music. That was me. I enjoyed the very passive, the very not that difficult arenas. Later on, understanding that orchestra is actually a lot harder than it looks. But no, I really didn't like to run. The only element of running that was in my life at that time was my sister competed in track, and at that time my only concepts of running were like baton relay races, and then like your 100 meter 200 meter dashes. Long distance was never a thing that I even knew existed until, sadly, about 5 years ago. I was pretty late to the game. But what kind of sparked the interest was after I had kind of decided that I wanted to really actively pursue growth and pursue my life and pursue changing and developing as a person and developing, starting to work on my flaws. And a lot of that was early Christian, early relationship with God and all that, and learning. And, any Christian will understand that when you decide to give your life to Christ, he starts showing you things that you don't like. But I didn't shy away from those things. Instead, I decided that I wanted to make a change. And so what that led me to was a lot of entrepreneurship. I was really into entrepreneurship. I really wanted to be a CEO. To me, that was the ultimate goal, that to own my own company. And so I started working on becoming the person that I hadn't envisioned of becoming. What did a CEO look like to me? And that's what I wanted to do. So what that led me into was reading a bunch of books. That was kind of step number one, learning, gaining knowledge. And I read a whole bunch of entrepreneurship and leadership books like, John C. Maxwell, Simon Sinek, things of that nature, Jocko Willink, things like that. So what that led me to was the book by Phil Knight called Shoe Dog. And it's his biography / memoir about Nike and how it started, and the beginning, early baby stages of Nike, and his life leading up to it. In that book, yes, there was a lot of business know-how and things of that nature, but it kind of started talking about running and what running was. And he started talking about back in the day when running wasn't cool. And then, talking about Prefontaine and just freaks of nature like that made the sport popular and made it what it is today. I was about 19 when I read that book. This kind of running thing kind of seemed cool to me. I started kind of getting an interest in it. On top of learning about running, I also discovered that I really enjoyed biographies, and I loved learning about people's lives and listening to, their accomplishments and the steps leading up, their successes, their failures, their life. So Lubbock has what they call Friends of the Library book sale. And basically what that is you go down to the basement and they have all their books that they want to get rid of, and you can just go and buy a bunch, and they're super cheap. Part of that purchase was a book called Run the Mile You're In by Ryan Hall. And he was a competitive runner. And that book, he's also a believer. I don't know. I read that book, and that book kind of just said, "This is you. This is what I want to do." That feelings that he felt, I want to feel, and it just kicked things off for me. I really got inspired by that book, and I started kind of doing some research into running. And as a element to add to the story, on top of that, during that time, my stepdad, Jon, had also finally gotten me to start working out with him. His story is absolutely incredible, and it kind of was an inspiration to me. He had lost over 80 pounds.
Wow.
And man, it just, like, to see that transformation and the fact that he was still dedicated and going to the gym all the time really, really inspired me. And it led me to wanting to nip, if I was getting a little overweight at that time. And so I said, I'm still young. I want to get the habits built now, because if I can build the habits now, then that leads to a healthier lifestyle when I'm 30 years older. So that was the motivation. And so I started working out with my stepdad, Jon, a lot. Pretty much, it was 4 times a week at that point, but every session was an hour to an hour and a half minimum, and still is. But going back to the books and running, I was working out a lot. I was really getting into health and fitness and nutrition and learning all these things about working out and all these things about taking care of your body, and it was just like a whole new world to me that I never knew existed. And I found creativity and artistry in it. I found a way to express my own artistry. And so running was like, man, this is cool. This I want to do. That also, during that time of kind of after that book and kind of getting into running, learning a little bit about running, I started incorporating some running sessions into my routine. That led me to another book, another biography by Cameron Hanes called Endure. And I read that, and that pretty much was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, reading that one, because he's just an ordinary guy that did ordinary things and made something out of it. And I was just absolutely inspired by that. And I took it up. I said, this is something that I think I can really do. I think I wanted to feel that high that all of them were talking about feeling, and that's what I'm chasing. That's what I want. That's what I desire and I crave and I pursue with every competition, with every training, with every mile that I run. I think the catalyst for starting my health journey was because, yes, back then I was a really skinny kid. I was like, to put it in perspective, I was 95 pounds at 14. I was an absolute twig. And I was just a little guy. Unfortunately, during that period of time, that pretty much solidified me as the dartboard for insults and bullying and things of that nature. So I dealt with a lot of that. But on top of that, Dad wasn't in the picture. So there wasn't really a example of overcoming an identity that came growing up. And so I think when I cracked open the can, basically on all this running stuff, motivation was probably a little bit pushed to try and prove something, to try and make, not even to anybody else in my past, but to prove to myself that I wasn't the person that, everybody said I was when I grew up, that I wasn't a skinny, scrawny kid that didn't accomplish anything,
Right.
A little bit of it, was to prove that. But the more and more that I got involved, the more and more I matured and grew up and dealt with some of those issues. And, a lot of that ended up becoming just fuel. A lot of it ended up just pushing me to further want to be stronger, be better, be, succeed at things and accomplish things. But the why behind it changed at I would say a halfway point in between this race and when I started. I finally realized that I didn't have to prove anything to anybody. But on the other hand, I do still want to grow. I do still want to not only take care of my health, but also, do what I love to do. And it became more of a enjoyment instead of a fight. And I ended up, it became more of a healthy pursuit.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I've always heard it said that, and this is not always the case, but in general, that need sometimes gets you started in a particular direction, necessity, if you sort of rephrase it, but what keeps you there is passion. That is real important in the grand scheme of things, is that whatever the motivational factor, the catalyst, if you will, to start in something, is not the end result that keeps you there. It's the passion, the enjoyment. Because a lot of people, like, let's don't even look at running, for instance. A lot of people get into a career, and actually it starts out not even as a career, it starts out as a necessity job. And then when they're in the middle of it, they realize they enjoy it. And so what started them out by necessity, they end up doing because of enjoyment, and they excel at it. And like I said, that's not always the case, but in a lot of cases it is. So I applaud you for staying with it and continuing on through it. Now, I think that I think I remember seeing the podcast that you're talking about with your stepdad, Jon. And I will tell you this, it was very, very motivational, even for someone like me. That's not often you find somebody that actually has lost that much weight. And there's a lot of people that say they'd like to lose that much weight, but to actually do it, that's a pretty significant hit. And I could see where that could really motivate your thought process on doing something like, racing or running or whatever you want to call it.
Well, with Jon too, it was, he started during COVID. And I did interview Jon, and we talked about his life and his journey and his weight loss journey, and what kind of led him to it, and what he did basically. But yeah, he taught me a lot about nutrition. He taught me a lot about taking care of your body, and it's all about what you intake, because that's going to affect everything. And his absolute dedication to losing the weight inspired me more than anything else, because what I saw was he didn't skip days. He didn't cheat. He didn't do any of that, because in his mind, there is only one end result, and that's losing the weight. there is only one goal, and not accomplishing that goal is absolute failure. Because if you don't follow the new habits that you're trying to build, you go right back into the old habits that feel comfortable. And what that taught me was, with passion comes a balance of pursuit. You can throw everything you've got into it, but that's everything you've got, and you leave nothing left over for the other areas of your life that need your energy and your time. And that's about where I was at the very beginning. But realizing that with Jon and working out with Jon and seeing what he was doing and learning more than just the weights and lifting and things like that, it was the mindset, it was the thought processes, it was the approach. Yeah, I mean, it was encouraging.
Well, let's move forward to one of the things that you said earlier about everybody's kind of individually running their race. Whereas, you know, you go to the gym, you see people that have workout partners all the time, and they motivate you right there on the spot. You know, you can do this, you can push, you can do this, whatever. Whereas in a competitive running thing, you don't typically see, in my uneducated opinion, you don't see near the partnership type stuff that you see in other sports. Certainly, it's not a team sport. I guess it could be if it's in an Olympic setting, but this is a very individualistic pursuit. And so how do you stay focused, I guess, on the motivation when you don't have somebody pushing you to go the extra mile, no pun intended here, to pursue it, to stay with it, which to me, this harkens to like the discipline aspect of staying with it, since you don't have the motivation factor of other people, pushing you to train, pushing you to get signed up for this event, pushing you to go to the event, pushing you to race right alongside you, pacing you. How does that play into this? I mean, is this really just boiled down to you're passionate, or any other person that's doing this is passionate and this is what they want to do? I mean, do you understand where I'm coming from? Because it's not a partnered push like you have in working out, like at a gym or something.
Well, that goes back to, why are you on the starting line to begin with?
Okay.
You're absolutely right. And the main reason that you don't have partners is because usually who you run with isn't going to be at your endurance level. And so they're either going to go way ahead of you or you're going to go way ahead of them. It's hard to stay at the same pace with somebody else because you're going to build endurance differently. You're going to build, if you start at the same time, everybody starts differently and builds differently and reaches a certain level differently. Even my brother was telling me when he did his 5Ks, there was a few buddies of his that had absolutely no problem running and could run talking to you in a conversation, and you trying to match that pace could be like exhausting every amount of energy you've had in you. So it's just a very difficult to run with people. Now, in more involved, bigger races, a lot of times they do have pacers that run at one specific pace, that you do run at that specific pace to keep you at, that specific pace. But even then, running is very, I think a lot of people have a hard time with it, mostly because it's you and nothing else. It's you and the track. And you can put music in, but some races don't let you. But it's just you and your thoughts, man. I mean, you're out there on your own thinking about everything that you've done in the past 10 years. But yeah, it goes back to, it can be passion. A lot of people, it is passion. And I think these bigger races like ultra marathons and things of that nature, a lot of people do it because that's exactly what, either they're doing it as a career and they've got sponsors and they're being paid to do these things, or they just flat out really love to run, and that's why they do it. They do it because they love to run, and that's me. I do it because I just love to run. And then like I've mentioned earlier, you've got those people that are out there that have had maybe a rough go at life, and them running that race is just their way of resetting, moving to a new chapter.
So this event in Monahans that you completed, what was the demographic? I mean, you did say that, you had some of the participants doing the 5K versus the 10. Some even were just walking a 1 mile. What would you say, what was your observation of the demographic set of people? I mean, if you were just to take a sampling, did it range from the very young to the very old, or was it kind of a medium range group of people?
Well, it's interesting demographic-wise because there is no age limit.
Is there age limits in some of these other ones?
Some of them do have age limits.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of them are 18 and older types. But at the starting line, I was talking to a guy that was 81.
Really?
And he was running his first 10K or first 5K rather in his life. Period.
Wow.
And he said, "I want to do it before I die."
Whoa.
And that was his motivation.
Man.
Then again, at the end, they were handing out first, second, third place trophies, and there were 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds. There was kids.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. Even though it's a competition and it's also individualistically paced at your own rate, and the purpose is to finish, obviously, you are not going to be able to compete against somebody that is in high school, that is conditioned, and their metabolism is different than yours. Their fitness level is probably better than yours. Their endurance. So do they structure these events to where everybody gets a chance to, I guess, for lack of a better term, place in their own way? How does that work?
So most races, when they decide first place, second place, and third place, I would say vast majority of your common generic 5K, 10Ks, whatever, are going to structure it via age groups. There are age structures, and you have your first, second, third in each age group. Because you're right, there's no way I'm ever going to be a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, whatever, that runs cross-country every day. Not only do I not run cross-country every day, but he's 20 years younger than me. There is no way, Then again, the 81-year-old that I mentioned, there's no way he's going to compete against someone like myself. I'm 60 years younger than he is. So they do have your top first, second, and third, which is the overall winners. And then most of the time, then they go into first, second, and third for each age group. And then that's your winners. A lot of other races do have finisher races or finisher medals for if you compete, then you get a trophy for just finishing the race. Because some of these, like for example, there's most marathons I believe do this. There is a finishing limit, a time that you have to get above in order to actually be classified as a finisher.
Like a qualifying.
Yes.
number.
Well, not necessarily qualifying because you're not trying to qualify for anything, but if you miss that time or you come behind that time, even though you cross the finish line, they still classify you as a DNF, which is did not finish.
And see, to me, that in some ways that would, for some people, probably me, that would deter me. It would not encourage me, because to me the whole purpose of doing it is depending on your competitive spirit, I suppose, or competitive makeup, I think, finishing is a huge accomplishment, and something of that magnitude, not necessarily the one that you were in, but, especially if you did a marathon or something like that, and then to compete and to race and to finish and then be told that you didn't finish when you know very good and well that you've crossed that finish line, to me that's, and I'm not trying to be, the bad cop here and say whatever, but to me that's absolutely discouraging.
It can be discouraging, but in my opinion, it weeds out from the serious from the unserious.
I think if you did something like that, then there is a much higher level of competition that comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was going into a race knowing that there's a time limit to classify to even finish, then not only will that encourage me to train harder, because I know that if I don't meet that time frame, I will not finish. Then it also motivates me because everybody else is under that same classification, and everybody's going to be pushing their hardest to finish.
So really, there's these events that are, I guess, casual, and then there are, and even if there is a level or an element of competition even in these, like the one that you're talking about that you finished there in Monahans, but then there's the ones that are designed from the get-go to be
Absolutely.
Competitive.
Absolutely.
So there's two basic classes.
That brings up the element I mentioned earlier. Why are you doing it? Some people are there to make a career out of it. For example, the Lubbock Marathon just now announced that they are a Boston qualifier. So what that means is if you run that marathon and you meet I think it's 2 hour 30. If you make a 2 hour 30 marathon, you qualify to run in the Boston Marathon. Because with the Boston Marathon, you know, there may be millions of people that want to run it, but with that one, you have to qualify to run that race.
So the Boston Marathon is the penultimate, like,
of marathons, I would say yes. The Boston Marathon is like, if you qualify and you finish the Boston Marathon, you are a serious, legitimate runner, and that could open the door for sponsorships. That could open the door for
I was wondering how you was talking about a career runner. I was wondering how do you have a career in running? And then you just now said the sponsorship. So I suppose that somebody that's really doing this as a career, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to get signed as a sponsorship or something like that, or maybe later in life being able to teach fitness. I don't know. There's a whole lot of things that possibly pop up in that, but
it's a very wide world of even then some of those people could be shooting for Olympics.
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
That's kind of their marker. I think you have to run a sub 2:15 marathon to qualify for Olympic trials, and that's just to try to run the Olympics, to even get in it.
I'd like to talk a little bit here about your actual process, and not necessarily details unless you want to, but let's start from the beginning. So you signed up. Let me frame this. So you signed up for the one in Monahans. You chose it because of the terrain you talked about, and you know the area that it was being run in. It was familiar because you'd been to the park. So let's don't go into that because you'd mentioned that, but let's talk about prepping. Number one, we'll start with that. So what I'd like to do is visit the preparation process, the day before, the day of, and then after. So let's talk about the preparation process first. What steps, what process did you do to train for this? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, first and foremost, if you're going to train to run a race, especially any race that's going to be considered long distance, you got to put in the miles. There's no denying that. You've got to get your knees and joints and ankles, and running is a very high impact sport. You are pretty hard on your joints and your legs when it comes to run, and your back, and all the way up the spine. I mean, it's a very intense sport. So you've got to condition your body to be able to handle high mileage and run at speeds. There's something called plyometrics, which is the training of the small ligaments in your muscles that enforce speed. So like your hip flexors and things of that nature that play a part when it comes to speed. There was a period of time that I did, I think, strain my hip flexor, and I couldn't move that leg for a week. So things, they matter. To prepare for this race, my goal was not only to just get the miles in, but probably not the right mindset, but basically my thought was, let me run that distance as many times as possible to condition my body on what it's going to feel like. And here's a little secret for you. Kind of frustrated me was it wasn't a true 10K.
Really?
It was only about 4.5, maybe 4.8 miles. A true 10K is 6.2.
Interesting.
So when I finished, I actually had 2 more miles left in the tank I could have ran. And I'd been training for 2 more miles than what I actually ran. So it was a little bit of a frustration because I didn't get an accurate, true 10K time. But yeah, so in my training, my thought process was, let's get the miles in. Let's absolutely train the body. Secondly is recovery. When you're finished running, stretching, things of that nature are very important in my opinion to get the blood flowing. I also wore a knee brace because my left knee likes to have issues all the time. So I had a brace on during the run and things of that nature. So pre-race, my thought was a week before, I don't want to risk injury or any of that. So my goal was to taper and to not run the amount of mileage that I had been running during the peak of my training. So the week before, ideally, I decreased the miles and prioritized recovery and rest. Absolutely. You need all the energy you can get because the adrenaline's high. Nutrition is a huge aspect too that played a part in my preparation for this race. I had been taking creatine supplement for sure. Absolutely believe that creatine is crucial. Nobody gets enough creatine in their body no matter how much meat you eat unless you're on a carnivore diet, but even then. It's just good for you. Creatine's really good for you. I also would do collagen peptides with probiotics. Helps your gut microbiome, helps you kind of digest things easier, things of that nature. And also collagen peptides are amazing for your joints and bones. Very good for you. So I would prioritize those 2 supplements for sure. Talking about prepping race day, the night before, I really prioritized sleep. I wanted to get the absolute best night's sleep I could get because I knew I would need it. I didn't need the energy, and your body recovers through sleep. That's what sleep is for. It rebuilds and recuperates. Also on that, I did do some stretching, and I have the little back roller things that you lay on and you stretch out and it pops your back. So I loosened up basically. I popped some stuff, I stretched out, I did whatever I could do before I went to sleep that night to just kind of give myself the best fighting chance I could get and stay loose. I didn't want anything locking up, I didn't want anything cramping. Race day, I don't usually eat breakfast, but carbs are energy. So my goal was on nutrition the night before as well as the morning of. I kept anything I ate with everything that I ate had low acidity. I didn't want any acid reflux. I didn't want anything coming back. And also it was all easy to digest. Nothing was really heavy on anything. It wasn't high, fried food, none of that crap. Nothing that was going to be unhealthy for you. So simple carbs, simple fats, simple everything. So that was my priority going into the race. I also, a habit I learned from working out all the time is I wanted to get some carbs in before the race. 30 minutes is a good window. So 30 minutes before the race, I just had a little something.
So you mentioned sleep that first night prior to the race. And I'm wondering, and I'm sure other people would wonder too, you have said that this was your first event that you've actually participated in, there's no way that I'll believe that you absolutely just turned off everything and had a good night's sleep without some level of not anxiety really, but anxiousness. You know, there were butterflies before the event, and did you find yourself that night prior, the night before, having a difficult time sleeping?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was a nervous wreck. You know, the night before. Not only did I not know the course, which was extremely frustrating to me, being a preparatory planning type person. Um, it was also my first. You know, I didn't know what to expect. I had never signed up for anything. I'd never done one, so I didn't know what the steps were, what the process was. Um, and yeah, so I was just anxious that night and didn't, just anxious. Um, and yes, when that came to sleep, I struggled to go to sleep. Also, a little bit of excitement because, you know, I finally got to run a race. And, you know, just you're kind of, you're excited about it. You're nervous and excited.
Well, sure. It's like a kid going to his first theme park that he's or Disney World or something. He's been asking for it and wanting to, and his parents finally take him. And yeah, I could see that.
But you
It kind of offsets, I would think, because your adrenaline, anxiousness slash excitement that does keep you awake uh, carries over through the event anyway. So you may have a crash afterwards, but I would think that even though you didn't have optimal sleep, at least there was an endorphin rush that kept the energy levels and mental acuity going.
you don't have to worry about being excited when you get there and having adrenaline when you get there. You're going to
No.
be excited. You're
No,
going to have
imagine.
adrenaline. Really, the night before, like I was talking about in the sleep arena, don't play on your phone. Don't, because you're going to get stuck on it. You know, don't do a whole lot of caffeine, things of that nature. Really, the main goal is to build the environment as comfortable as you can, and just try to sleep. Do what you can. And yeah, I mean, the excitement's going to carry over. As soon as you get up in the morning, you know, you're gonna be hyped up. You're gonna be excited. It's the day of the race. You know, you're fixing to go and you're fixing to have a good time, and you just got to stay positive, man.
The day of. So here it is, the day of the race, and you get up, you eat breakfast, and your first one. I want to backtrack though. Interestingly enough, that you chose to do your first event in winter, which kind of surprises me because, and maybe it's just there was no choice and you wanted to do one and it was what was available. But in general, I would think that most people would not and have chosen winter to do a first event. I mean, of course, we haven't really had a lot of winter, but at the same time, why that? Was there just because it was there, or what played into that, if anything?
Well, choosing to do one in the winter, part of that was, yeah, I mean, that's just when they held the race, so
Sure.
didn't have a lot of choice there. But also, during my time of really digging in and researching running, I've heard a lot of people mention that the ideal temperature to run in is about 50, 60 degrees. Reason being, the hotter it gets, the more energy you exude when you run. You are going to burn more steam, so to speak, for lack of a better term, the hotter it is, which is evident. Obviously, you know, I've trained in the summer, Texas summer heats, which go up to 100 degrees. It's exhausting. It's extremely exhausting, and
I can see that.
I would really not. I would rather not run a big, long, exhausting race in 100-degree weather. On the flip side, it wasn't 30 degrees either. It wasn't brutally cold to the point where I couldn't handle the wind. The wind was decent. It wasn't that bad blowing. But also a good rule of thumb is to realize that when you run any race, this also plays a part because of adrenaline. Your body is going to be about 20 degrees hotter than the temperature outside. So actually during the run, I didn't because I didn't have anywhere to put it. But I actually was just going to take off my jacket and just run in my long sleeve shirt that was real thin because I was burning up.
So did you see a lot of runners in January that were running in what most people would say, well, they cannot possibly be comfortable in shorts and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean,
that's crazy to me.
It depends on who you are and your level of cold tolerance. Me, the only parts of my body that really seem to get cold is my fingertips and toes and nose, and that's it. So I would absolutely run that race in shorts. But really, as far as like outfits, what you see a lot is joggers is a big one. Also, you see a lot of shorts with tights and pullovers, things of that nature. Simple stuff, lightweight stuff that is, you don't want to add extra weight because the more weight you add, that's the more you're going to have to carry over long distance. And that takes more energy the more you have.
So you drive up to the site, you're there, you see participants, it's your first exposure to an event live with other people. Paint that scene for me. What's going on with participants and observers? What did you see?
Going back a little bit further than probably I need to, you mentioned the travel. You know, you drive 4 hours from where I'm from to Monahans, and you know you get the enjoyment of just driving to a different city, staying in a hotel, and waking up in the morning, and then so you get in the car, you pile up, you go, and first things first, right off the bat, you pull up, and you had people directing you, telling you where to park. And this was at a actual national state park, so you know they had plenty of volunteers, plenty of officials that were there willing to help out and do what they needed to do. So it was pretty well organized, I would say. Everybody was knew their place, knew what they were supposed to be doing. You kind of see all these people bundled up. You can tell who's going to run, who's not.
Well, how did you know? So
I mean, you can tell just by what they're wearing.
That's true.
I mean, obviously, if they're in shorts and tights, they're running. If they're in a pair of jeans, they're probably not going to be running. I personally would not run in a pair of jeans, but it's not impossible. People do it. There's a few people that have done it. But yeah, I mean, you can kind of gauge the level and so your first step is, of course, to register. A lot of races do have you register the day before, and you pick up your bib and your packet. But this one was...
When you say bib, what is that?
So your bib is your number. Really, here's your crash course on bibs. Put it where it's visible. That's it.
Wow.
All they need to know is what number you are. Because when you cross the finish line, they're going to write your number down and clock your time. So if your number isn't visible, they can't see who you are. So yeah, that's just, I personally, I would have rather put it on my leg. It's a little more out of the way that way. Also, they only give you 2 safety pins, which I think was retarded because there's 4 holes. So there wasn't really an ideal way to place it. But you just, stick it where you can, stick it where it's comfortable. And then you can do, you know, depending on when you get there, you can do your pre-race routine. What I saw a lot of people do was there was 2 arenas. There was the people like myself that just didn't care and didn't stretch or anything like that, and you just kind of hung out and hung around the starting line and chatted it up with people until the start. And then you had people who would actually, they had a track open enough to where you can actually do a little run. So I had seen several people that actually did a run to start things off, I guess, as a warm-up, which makes sense. I do a warm-up in my training. So yeah, there was people that were just running to warm up, get their legs moving, get the blood pumping. There was a lot of people stretching, doing those, you know, funky-looking A-skips and crap like that. I mean...
So I'm taking it from that standpoint that you didn't do a lot of that or whatever as far as like warm-ups and stuff like that go. Is it because you were there for the first time and you felt self-conscious, or what?
Oh yeah. I'm not a very center of attention type person, so anything that draws attention to me, I shy away from. So yeah, I didn't stretch or anything like that, but I will say, I should have done it because it helps. It actually helps. It helps a lot. It loosens
I
up
would
your
imagine
joints.
that the next event that you go to, you will be
Absolutely
doing
yes.
that, could care less about what people think, because you probably saw that most of those people don't care what people think either, and it's not that type of
No.
environment.
Nobody's going to give a crap if you're running or stretching. Yeah, absolutely. You're in an environment of running, and doing things to help you prepare and stretch for running is absolutely fully acceptable, and nobody's going to question it.
So then you line up.
Yes. So then, you have your time that you line up, and you have your starting line. General rule of thumb in any race of this nature is that your faster runners are always going to line up at the front. Your more slower runners line up in the back. I kind of hung around the middle because I wasn't going to be the slowest, but I wasn't going to be the fastest either, for sure.
Well, so like, okay, in this particular event, you had the various distances that people were participating in. You had the 10K, you had the 5K, you had the 1. Did all the fastest runners of each one of those legs were at the front, or what did you observe? I mean, did everybody just like take off and go get them, and we're gonna pass everybody, or what did you see in that?
As naturally expected, yes. When they give you the green light and you're ready to go, there's always going to be those that are gonna just book it. And you know what? They may be able to handle that magnitude of running, but I guarantee you about halfway through, they're going to slow down. Never, ever, ever, unless you train for it and you can do it, just take off at the start. You're going to waste all the energy you have right at the beginning.
So it's a pace situation.
It's absolutely a pace thing. You've got to realize, I'm going to be running a lot of miles. In my instance, it was a 10K, so in my thought process, that's 6 miles I've got to have energy for. The beginning is more, when I was going, I didn't start off running, I started off walking. I did my warm-up first on the track. And, around me were families, were, people my age too, that and middle age, and just it's really, there's no specific demographic. Who you saw taking off is usually the ones donned in neon that probably do this all the time, and this is just a fun thing for them.
I wonder, and this is just a curiosity statement, probably can't even have data to back it up, but I wonder sometimes that the flashy attire is part and parcel to the personality of the person that's participating.
They're there to be flashy. They're there to whoop your ass. That's their goal. Their entire goal is to win. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and 9 times out of 10, yeah, they do win. My working theory on the neon and the flashiness is, like I mentioned about running in really hot temperatures, 100 degrees in Texas, the darker your clothing is, the more heat it's going to absorb and the hotter it gets. If I wear dark shoes in the summertime, my feet burn. They actually burn the bottoms because the friction builds and it's just so hot that darker color just takes on all the heat. Bright colors, whites, neons, the bright, flashy colors actually reflect sun and keep you cooler. So my theory is that a lot of those flashy colors really started just to probably to combat the heat.
Maybe, or just maybe a fad.
It's always a fad. Everything's a fad at a certain point. I mean, honestly.
Okay, so now let's look at this. You are off the finish line. You are in the race. At first, I would imagine you were looking around at the various people passing you, or not, and at a certain point, I suppose in this particular event, you were able to listen to your headphones or whatever you took with you. But you had whatever time limit, or not even, let me rephrase that. You had your pace, you had your goal, you had your finish line to get to. What was that like as you were running? What went through your head? What did you listen to, if you listened to anything? What is that process for you?
Well, kicking off the starting line, it was tempting to run. I had the energy to run for sure. I could have easily ran those first 3 miles. But part of it was my Garmin. With the Garmin, you can actually set a pacing strategy. It allows you to select a race and add your race to your calendar, and then during the race, you start your watch like a normal run, and then you have pacing levels, and if you go under or below that pace, it'll beep at you and let you know that you're not at that pace. So that's one method, is using your watch to kind of maintain that pace. Usually, generally, what you want to do, my thought process was start slow, build my way, maybe go a little faster that second, third, fourth, fifth mile, and then at the end, give it everything I've got to get to the finish line. All your reserves, you just take off and you finish strong. That's the goal. That's the strategy. But yeah, I mean, when I kicked off the race, when I first started going, there were those that booked it past me, and it's like, it can be kind of discouraging, because you think to yourself, why am I not that good? It's very tempting to beat yourself up because you're not running. But you got to remember that, like I said, usually those people either do this all the time, or they're just better at running because they've trained for it. But I passed quite a few people. I passed, actually a lot more than I expected to pass. I maintained my pace and just stayed at that level. And then, if there was somebody that was going a little bit slower, I'd just go around them and move on, and then, go from there. And that was really it the whole time. What I will say is, everybody started at the same time, like I mentioned, which means that I was running / walking with the 5K people at the first 3 miles. So they have you going through, and then they made you do a turn, and then that turn kind of had another little loop, and then you went to, they had a little pit area. You go down, and then it's just this big parking lot area, and then they turn you back around. There are aid stations there.
Okay.
There were people with water that volunteered, and they brought water, and trust me, water is crucial there, because you want to stay hydrated. If you don't stay hydrated, don't get your electrolytes, you can actually cramp up, which is not good. So yeah, I would say always take advantage of every aid station you run into. If you see one, use it. I mean, you can make up the mileage later. Because of the fact that it's individual, it doesn't matter to anybody but you. So I had my playlist that I called Chicken Peck, which is a play on, it's jazz funk and kind of disco-y type music.
Cool.
That's what I really enjoy. I'm a bass player, so I really get into that kind of music, and it pumps me up. My goal with the playlist was to play music that got me pumped up. Now, also being a musician, I have a tendency to follow the rhythm. So my goal with a lot of these songs that I was listening to was I wanted to listen to music that had a fast BPM that was going to be quick, because I was going to probably follow that rhythm. So yeah, upbeat music, upbeat songs. Normally I would listen to an audiobook, because it's something in the background that you can just kind of listen to, and it kind of tunes down your thoughts. But yeah, so I maintained a pretty steady, easy to manage pace at the beginning. I got through all the first 5K just walking. My goal was after the 5K I would do some running. I made it all the way through the 5K, let some people pass me, passed some people, got my first aid station secured and had me some water, and then still had the songs playing in my head. A lot of it was, just various upbeat funk type stuff. And then, bam, came time for the second half, which for the 5K people, that meant they turned around and went back. For the 10K people, we had another stretch of leg left to go. Or another leg left to go. So this is where it got difficult for me in the mental game and in the physical game. After the 5K people broke off, everybody was running. Everybody. There wasn't a single person in the 10K area that was not running. And
sounds like NASCAR.
Yeah. You break a certain threshold, and then bam, everybody takes off. That point, the casuals were separated from the serious.
Did you expect that? Did you know about that?
I did not expect that at all. I assumed that there was a lot more people that were a lot more casual like myself that would run a 10K, but I was not correct. There were some surprising individuals that I didn't think would be running a 5K or a 10K, but yeah, everybody was running. So it was a little bit discouraging. At that point, I was fighting in my head, should I be running? Should I not be running? What do I need to do here? Because my thought was if I ran, I would fit in and blend in with the cool kids, so to speak, and people wouldn't judge me. But on the other hand, I knew that physically there was no way that I was going to be able to run an actual 10K. Now, I did plan to run some, but there's no way I was going to be able to do that. And so it was a battle. It was a mental battle. But ultimately, I decided, let's just keep walking and finish this thing. Nobody else matters. It's just your race. It's just you, your only goal to get through the finish line, and that's it. And so that's what I did. And I kept that thought process going throughout the thing. So I was going, and then there was a guy in front of me that had a phenomenal strategy, and I ended up adopting this strategy near the end. This terrain was hilly where they sent the 10K people. There was a lot of strange elevations. None of it was really difficult because it was a paved road, so it wasn't like rocks and stuff, but it was definitely graded. So I started taking on the guy. I was watching a guy that was running about the same level I was running, and he was walking. And I was like, okay, so it's okay. It's okay to walk. It's okay to slow down and do what you personally know you can do. But this is where it got interesting. So in all actuality, it was about 3.5 miles in, because like I mentioned, this wasn't a true 6 miles. It was just me. Everybody else that was running was way ahead of me, and anybody else that may have been walking was way behind me. There was nobody around me. It was literally just me and the track. That's it. And
probably some spiritual stuff there too.
It very much invited not only some doubts, like, man, I must be really far behind, or man, I'm doing really good. I knew I wasn't.
Yeah.
I knew for a fact I wasn't really far ahead, but it got a little discouraging because I was like, there's no way that I suck that bad, that I'm this far behind. I mean, you could look for miles. There's nobody there.
So yeah, it was like just guessing, it would be like a mental picture of, I'm by myself. I'm alone.
Absolutely. And a lot of that race beyond the 5K was just me. There was a lot of that race I ran by myself. Probably a good 1.5 miles of it was just solo. Nobody around me but dirt and sand. And that proved to me how isolating it can be sometimes to run, and why a lot of people talk about the isolation and how it's just you and your thoughts. It is, because at certain points, it's just you and your thoughts. But at a certain point, near closer to the end, I did start seeing some people, and of course, they were running, and I was not. Going back to what I was mentioning earlier with the guy that I was kind of adopting a strategy, he started running on the downhills and walking up the uphills. And that's a really good strategy. Not only because when you're going downhill, you're using less energy, so you can make up some time if you run it. And some of those hills were pretty steep. I mean, you were going down pretty hard. So I started running down hills. I said, all right, at this point till the end, I'm going to walk uphill and I'm going to run downhill, because I didn't have the stamina or endurance to run up and downhill. There was no way I could do it. So I got through there. And then near the end, I did finally start catching up with some people, and it was getting near the final stretch. And there was a guy and a girl, and the girl was running, and she was a little bit ahead of me, and the guy was running as well, and he was a good chunk away from me, but not enough to where I couldn't catch up. So at that point, I knew I was getting closer to the end, because my watch was showing my watch had the course on it, and I could see it was making a loop anyway, so I could see that I only had a little bit left to go. And I said, all right, at this point, I have enough energy left in me. Let's run this thing. That is the point when I say to anybody, give it all you got. So I did that. So I ended up passing the girl, which gave me a little sense of, gotcha. But the guy, I let pass me. I'll say that. I know that sounds cocky, and maybe that I'm making it up. But no, genuinely, I could have passed him. But it would have been more difficult to try and pass him, and so I just said, you know what, I'll just let him pass, and then I'll still run, but I'm just going to let him pass me, because at that point, you're then deciding what place do I want to make, So right there at the end, I just ran, crossed that finish line, and that was it. And you were done. And it was like, wow, I didn't, you accomplished it. You succeeded. I will say this, right before the final stretch, when I was by myself and everybody was ahead of me, there was a moment where I said, I could quit right now. I was really kind of thinking about, I was hurting. My ankle, like I mentioned, was in a pretty bad shape.
So when did that actually start becoming the
ankle
issue on the run?
The ankle started becoming a problem probably about 3/4 of the way through. It was the uphills that were killing it. And
so really you didn't have any opportunity to condition your body for hills.
No, because I live in such a flat area.
Oh, sure.
There's no way I can get training for grain of elevation unless I do it on a treadmill.
So what actual injury, if you want to call it that, or inflammation, or what would you call that? It wasn't an actual accident, was it?
No, it wasn't. The ankle wasn't an accident. It was just my ankles were not used to going up and down and rolling
pronating,
around. Because of the different grades. Because like I mentioned, I couldn't train for hills, and so therefore my ankles were not used to using different ligaments to run up and down hills. So it started flaring up. It was inflammation. It was not really a pain, like a burning pain. It was more sharp at a certain angle. But unfortunately, the angle that it hurt every time in was the angle that I needed it to be in to run. So I kind of had to move my foot around a little bit and run a little funky in areas in order for it not to hurt when I ran.
So the ankle was a part of the end of the deal, and you finished the race. At the end of the race, when you crossed over, did you know your time at that point?
It was a little clock thing that they
I
had.
see.
That had red, the red time, whatever. But they had a guy with a stopwatch that was standing there literally waiting for you to cross the finish line. And as soon as your foot crossed that mark, he clicked it. And that was your time. So, yeah, I didn't know exactly what time, but I knew what time I wanted to get. I wanted to try and do it within an hour.
Were you successful?
And, yeah, I was successful. I did it an hour and like 6 seconds.
That's awesome.
The downside is you get caught up in times. sometimes, and you're always trying to beat your previous time. In my mind, I didn't have a time to beat because I never done it before, so my goal was this time, and yeah, I felt pretty accomplished when I realized that I made it. Nowadays, and in the future, in the back of my mind, I'm always going to be thinking 1 hour 6. And if I can run my next 10K in less than 1 hour 6, then I've, in my mind, improved. But the problem was they also started handing out trophies for, your places at the end. There was no participation trophy, so if you didn't make it within the first 3 of your age group, then you just finished it. That's all you did. A couple days later, on their Facebook page, they did finally post all of the times for everybody and what time you got. And on that paper, on that post, you could see the exact time you got. The guy that I had let pass me at the end, that I could have overtaken, just chose not to, got 3rd place.
Oh my goodness.
I had gotten 4th. I was like 30 milliseconds behind him. I mean, we literally crossed the finish line together, but he was like slightly in front of me. If I had passed him, I would have gotten that 3rd place trophy.
Maybe he needed it more than you.
He might have needed it more than me, and you know what? Kudos to that guy. Props, because he succeeded. But also, it showed me, like, dude, I did way better than I thought I did.
That's good.
4th place in my age group. Let me clarify, in my age group.
Sure, of course.
I didn't even think I'd get placed. I mean, I thought I was going to just get absolutely trashed, and I didn't. Even though I did all that walking, even though my ankle was flared up, even though there was a point when I wanted to stop and quit, I did far better than I ever thought I could.
And you know what, I think in life, in general, that's a good lesson to keep in the forefront of your mind, is that anytime that you do anything that requires a level of training or a level of work or hard work or preparation, we are our own worst enemies. We always think that we do worse at something than we actually do. And that's human nature. It's not been redeemed, so to speak, because I think part of it is because we are, as a society, raised from childhood to value. Our value is directly tied to measured success, and a lot of times that comes into play when we really do well at everything that we do. Do we have failures? Yes. Do we have times that we don't live up to our own expectations? And that really is what it boils down to, is that we have higher expectations a lot of times than even God does for us. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that God does have expectations for us, or he wouldn't have put it in the scripture. But in general, we are our own worst critics.
Oh, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're always going to beat yourself up more than anybody else could ever do for you. And that's never going to change. That's never going to stop. There's nothing you can do about it. But it's not really the fact that you are your own worst critic. It's when you decide that your critic is right.
And I think too, on this first one, and I guess we're kind of ending the cap here. So you competed, you finished. Later on, you found out that you did far better than you thought. But let's talk about that post run, and then I guess even following up. You don't have to go into great detail here, but post run, within the week of after the run, there had to be a level of relief, so to speak, or even a sense of accomplishment. And I would say that probably the more that you do these, there will be less catharsis, so to speak, of the first one. You know, it's like this is your first one. So you're mental, emotional reactions to doing another one. Not that it's not going to still feel accomplishment in your psyche, but the more you do them, the less emotional impact they probably will have as time goes along. You will still absolutely know a sense of accomplishment, but it will just spurn more depth of wanting to do more.
You've got to respect the first time for anything that you
Sure.
do. You've got to have an appreciation and an enjoyment and a love and remembering where you started. And ultimately, my desire, I really, really, really want to run an ultra marathon. Doing a Leadville 100 race or the Leadville 100 race or something like that, that is my ultimate goal. And so to me, keeping that emotional high as I progress towards that goal is really just continuing to challenge myself with things that are more difficult than what I'm doing now. But
Yeah,
this particular 10K is always going to have the very special place in my heart of the fact that this is where I started.
well, and then knowing what I know about your podcast, the Apex Mindset, and how you have interviewed people that have overcome obstacles, have incorporated their faith into those overcoming obstacles. I think that with this, it's not so much about, you always want to do better. Yes, of course, but it's like anything else. There's just all kinds of, and I want to bring the spiritual side into this, is the fact that we never arrive on this side. We are always pushing forward towards that prize. And so with a sense of accomplishment, we never want to get to the point where it's status quo. And there always should be a next level, a point B, a point C, a point D. And even though you've completed, let's say you do 10 more 10Ks, and for each one of those are going to be honed. Each one of those are going to be better because you've conditioned better. You know what to expect better. But then you have the next goal in mind. The 10K is just a now, not an accomplishment. It is a springboard for something bigger. And I think that's the way it is in life. But I do believe too that there's another side of this, and it's not always a point A and point B. There always is that, yes, but there's also a time of rest and enjoyment of what you've accomplished. And believing that, thank you, God, that you helped me through this particular trial, because even if it is a competition and enjoyment, it's a trial too, because there was a lot of work involved in achievement there. And I think life is dynamic. I think that your pursuit of this passion of running will lead to other pursuits in the same vein, and it could carry over into other areas of your life as well. And I applaud that. If there's anything that you would say to anybody that's maybe considered jumping into running, what things would you say to somebody like that?
Well, ultimately, I'm in full agreement of the fact that you never settle on this side of Earth. You never settle in this life. There's always going to be a goal that you're trying to reach, and if there isn't, make one. You should always want to challenge yourself. You should always want to push to be better, because you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to actually succeed at perfection. So there should always be something stronger, harder, faster, bigger. And if it's not there, if nobody's done it, be the first. Be the one that kicks it off. But yes, resting and recovering, and like I mentioned, even after this 10K, I spent time to let my body heal and enjoy the spoils. Not really,
Absolutely.
not winning, but finishing, of actually succeeding at a goal that I had set. Now there's a bigger goal, and now I'm going to work for that. But to say, or to give advice to somebody that is wanting to do this, don't wait. I mean, don't sit on it. There are people on that track that you would be shocked could even run a mile. And there are people on that track that you are shocked can't. There is no age limit. There is no requirement to getting involved. You just it all boils down to, do you want to do it? Do you want to start? Yes or no? And if yes, then find a race that's fun and do it, and sign up and enjoy it. You know, and the community is absolutely inspirational. There's even clubs. There's always, and in any area, wherever you are, even here, there's 3. There's groups and clubs that you can join that go on runs for fun with the group and the club, and there's a community based around it and things like that, and they all race together, and you just got to have fun with it, man. It's got to be fun. The second that it's not, that's when you're doing it wrong.
We're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Or doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and I often wonder too that he's talking about enjoying the spoils, so to speak. I think that's part of our nature, that we need to be able to enjoy those accomplishments. But at the same time, I think there is, like you said, the next level. There is the next pursuit. And pursuit is so intrinsically part of running, pursuit, and I think that discovery of that passion that you really have inside and want to do is absolutely key. And I think too, you mentioned something there that, just start, just do it. There's a lot of people that don't know how to do that. I'm one of them. I mean, I have a lot of things that I want to do, and as you get older, things get in the way. Either you don't feel good, or some people just are not self-starters. So how do you approach that to people that want to do something but find it, and it's not even really procrastination, because they haven't started it and then they're putting it on the shelf. It's just they haven't started.
If you don't know what you're walking into, it's always going to be scary right
True.
off the bat. You're going to be afraid of it. But the one thing I kept repeating when I was going into this 10K was, I want to finish this. I want to compete. I want to complete this race, even if I'm scared and I want to quit. There's moments and there's excuses I kept coming up with to why I could not do it. My thought process was, as soon as I finish, I know what to expect going forward, and it's not going to be as scary anymore. So let that be your motivation. Let that inspire you and say that, whatever it is that you're not starting is always going to be the hardest part, taking that first step. But once you do, it's not as big and it's not as heavy and it's not as scary as you made it out to be.
And I think too that part of that too is like really taking self-examination as to why you're worried. Why are you fear? Name that fear. Why are you afraid to start? If that is part of the...
Absolutely. And there's a pastor that wrote a book called Winning the War in Your Mind that I'm currently reading, and one of the statements he makes is, you cannot change what you do not confront.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
And that's absolute fact. And you name that fear, you say that this will not control me, and you face it.
Those mental roadblocks don't always play a part, but a lot of times they do. And so you have to look at things like, okay, well, what am I really afraid of is going to happen? If I don't do this, or if I do this, what is the worst thing that could happen? Is that, failure is failure when you stop and don't continue.
Oh,
then it's failure.
That failure is not getting knocked down. Failure is giving up.
Yeah.
And honestly, what comforted me the most and kind of gave me the push that I needed to run this race and not be scared of it anymore was the fact that there was an 81-year-old dude running for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
Age is not a limitation.
And I think, too, that sometimes in life there is limitations. And so if you really are passionate about accomplishing something or doing something that does literally have physical limitations or does have roadblocks that really you can't overcome, then figure out a way around that mountain. Figure out a way to change the parameters to where you may not be able to do it on the level of somebody else, or you may have to do it in a different way. But it's not always mental. Sometimes you have to figure out a new strategy and to accomplish it. You know what I mean?
Well, that goes back to my statement I made a little bit earlier. If nobody else is doing it, be the first. On a more drastic scale, if you don't have legs, you know, there are a plethora of races of people who don't have legs that have overcome that hurdle and have found a way to run anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you
Well,
can't.
and I suppose if you could even look at it. Okay, so your knee is going to give you problems. So that is your, no pun intended, handicap. And so at some point, if you weren't a competitive runner that had goals for marathons and you just wanted to participate, and your knee or your leg or whatever, your foot was a hindrance, you still have competition. You're competing with yourself.
Well, that goes to, you got to know your limits.
Sure.
You got to know what you can and cannot do. You got to learn your body 100% because it's going to tell you what it doesn't like. Now, sometimes you got to push a little past that because sometimes your body tells you things that are wrong, that are not really wrong. It's just fear.
Yeah,
you
pain is not necessarily right.
No, pain, and there's a runner that is a phenomenal, inspirational person. Her name is Courtney DeWalter. She talks about something called the pain cave, and you basically teach your brain what's real pain and what's just fear. And you got to learn the difference. And oftentimes, yeah, I mean, there are moments when you have limitations, and going back to what you said, sometimes the battle is not going to be competing, it's going to be you overcoming that obstacle, that limitation, and succeeding. But that also comes with the same process of training. You got to research, but also, you know, okay, for example, my knee, going back to that because that's an area I have of relation. I know that it's going to hurt, but I'm also in the process of training that knee to be able to handle more mileage because I know that if I can condition it better, then it won't hurt as much. If I can build it up, if I can recover that knee, you know, the more and more that I train that knee with small increments of struggle with what would be considered pain, eventually it's going to get to the point where that knee no longer bothers me. You know, learn how to still do what you love to do despite your limitations. There's always going to be a way if you put in the energy and the effort and the passion into figuring it out.